The wind cut across the Wyoming plains like a sharpened blade, stinging Clara Rawlins's cheeks as she pushed the last shovel of frozen dirt onto her husband's grave. The mound was small, uneven, and already gathering a thin crust of frost. James was gone, 24 years old and lowered into the ground, with no preacher, no hymns, and no real comfort. The few people from Sage Hollow who attended had already disappeared back to warm houses and boiling kettles, eager to leave the widow behind. Clara stood alone beneath a sky that seemed far too big for her small, brittle body. Her black dress clung to her legs in the icy wind, and the bruising grief sitting heavy on her chest made it hard to breathe. She had come west with James, believing the land would give them a future. Instead, it had taken everything. Returning to the two-room cabin felt like walking into a memory that hurt to touch. James's hat still hung on its peg. His coffee cup sat exactly as he'd left it. The ghost of his tobacco lingered in the air. Clara folded onto their bed, pulled the thin quilt over her shoulders, and let the darkness swallow her whole. The next day brought a different kind of cold. Mr. Bick Henderson, the town banker, stood in her doorway, adjusting his bow tie as he explained the truth in a clipped, uneasy voice. The loan was in James's name. Payment was due. With James dead and no income, the bank would take the homestead. She had 1 week to clear out. Then the land would belong to someone else. Clara tried to fight, tried to reason, but the banker only shifted from foot to foot, mumbling apologies wrapped in business terms she barely understood. When he left, her entire world felt smaller than the cabin walls. She sold what she could. James's tools, their table, the rocking chair he built for her. But the neighbors came only to look, their eyes filled not with sympathy but superstition. "Bad luck hangs over that place," one muttered. Another refused to touch the axe James had used, claiming a dead man's tool invited a curse. By the end of the week, Clara had almost nothing left, just a few coins, a bag of beans, and her horse Daisy. She walked into town begging for work, any work, but every door closed in her face. The hotel keeper offered her nothing but a look that crawled across her skin. The general store owner apologized kindly, but said hiring her would send the wrong message to good church women. As the sun dipped low on her final day, long shadows crawled across Sage Hollow Street. That was when Silas Croft stepped out of the saloon. He was the wealthiest rancher in the county, a man whose belly strained against his fine wool coat and whose smile never reached his eyes. He tipped his hat like it meant something. "Mrs. Rawlins," he drawled, "I hear you're in a difficult position." Clara wrapped her thin shawl tight. "I'm managing." "No," he said softly, stepping closer. "You're not." His gaze traveled over her face, her small frame, her cold reddened hands. The way he looked at her made a chill crawl under her skin, deeper than any winter wind. "I have a large house," he said. "Plenty of work. You'd have food, warmth, protection." The last word felt like a trap snapping shut. She knew what he meant. Everyone did. He wasn't offering work. He was offering ownership. "I am not for sale," she said, her voice steady even as her stomach twisted. His smile twitched. "You'll think differently when hunger settles in, when sleeping on frozen dirt ain't so romantic, when a night in my home sounds better than freezing to death in the hills." He walked away, leaving her trembling in the street with anger and fear swirling in her chest. That night, Clara made a decision. She would not die under Silas Croft's control. She would not beg another townsperson who only saw her as a burden. If the world had cast her out, she would cast herself out further. She packed what little remained: blanket, beans, tin cup, and James' revolver. The cold metal in her hand felt heavier than memory. James had taught her to shoot, laughing as he guided her hands. She swallowed hard, pushed the memory away, and saddled Daisy. Without looking back, she rode into the darkening mountains. The first day offered a faint warmth, a deceptive kindness. But as Clara climbed higher, the trees thickened, the path narrowed, and the sky shifted from gray to something far more dangerous. Snow began to fall in sharp, swirling sheets. By afternoon, the storm had turned vicious. Wind howled like a living creature, Snow wrapped around her until she could barely see. Her fingers went numb. Daisy stumbled, frightened. Clara dismounted, trying to lead the mare through deepening drifts, but each step felt heavier than the last. She fell once, then again. A cold so deep it felt like sleep tugged at her bones. She forced herself up, whispering, "One more step, one more." But her body gave out. She collapsed into a drift, the storm swallowing the world around her. Just as darkness closed in, she saw a shape, tall, square, man-made, a cabin. Or the last hallucination before death. Everything went black. When Clara woke, it was to heat seeping into her frozen skin. Fire crackled. Something warm lay across her. Fur. Wood smoke filled the air. She blinked slowly until the room came into view. Rough-hewn logs, tools, traps, rifles, a stone hearth, and a man. Broad-shouldered, dark, shaggy hair. Pale, cold eyes watching her from a chair by the fire. She coughed weakly. He turned, and nothing in his stern, unreadable face suggested she was safe. The man rose from his chair with a deliberate calm that made Clara's pulse hammer. His boots were heavy on the wooden floor as he crossed to the hearth, dipped a ladle into a pot of broth, and brought it to her. He didn't kneel close, but his tall shadow fell across her like a warning. "Drink," he said. His voice was low, rough, steeped in a kind of loneliness she could feel in her bones. Clara's fingers trembled as she lifted the bowl. The warmth seeped into her hands, then into her chest as she swallowed. The broth was salty and rich, the best thing she had tasted in weeks. When she finished, he took the bowl without a word and returned to his chair. Silence hung between them, thick and strange. "Where am I?" she asked. "My cabin," he answered, eyes fixed on the fire. "And you are Eli Carver?" The name meant nothing to her, but something in the way he said it made her wonder what kind of man lived alone in a place the world seemed to have forgotten. "You found me," she whispered. "Found your horse first," he said. "You were half buried in snow. Would have died." His tone was flat. Not cruel, not kind, simply factual. Clara pulled the fur blanket tighter around herself, her fear battling with gratitude. He had saved her life, but she had no idea why. Men in these parts never did anything without a reason. "Thank you," she said softly. He didn't respond. The storm outside raged for days. Snow pushed against the cabin walls in thick, moaning waves. Inside, Eli's presence filled the small room like another weather system. He moved with quiet purpose at dawn, feeding the fire, leaving food for her, then disappearing into the mountains for hours at a time. He said little. He looked at her even less. Yet everything he did kept her alive. Clara tried to stay busy. She swept the floor with a brush of tied twigs, washed dishes in melted snow, and cooked stews from the rabbits he brought back. When she worked by the hearth, she could sometimes feel his gaze on her. A quick flicker, a breath, then gone. He kept his distance, but the space between them pulsed with something unspoken. One afternoon, she found a small journal tucked on a shelf near his bedroll. She hesitated, knowing it wasn't hers to touch. But curiosity pulled stronger than caution. The leather cover was worn smooth. Inside, the pages were filled with hard, jagged handwriting. Maps, sketches of men's faces, canyon trails, and sentences that read like confessions carved into stone. And a list of names, each one crossed out. A cold shiver ran through her. Footsteps crunched outside. She snapped the journal shut, shoved it back into place, and turned just as Eli entered, snow dusting his coat. He glanced at her, and for a split second she thought he knew. She moved back to the hearth, her heart pounding. Later that day, she heard a sharp curse from outside. Rushing out, she saw Eli gripping his hand where blood dripped onto the snow. His axe had slipped. "Let me see," she said. "It's nothing," he growled. "It is not nothing." He flinched when she reached for his hand, but she didn't back down. She cleaned the gash with melted snow, her touch gentle but firm. His hand was large and calloused, a map of scars and battles she couldn't name. The heat from his skin surprised her. When she wrapped the linen around his palm, she felt his breath hitch just once. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the walls he carried seemed to crack. Then he pulled away, turning his back as if the moment had burned him. The silence that followed grew heavier, thicker, until it finally broke days later. Clara was mending her dress by the fire when frustration spilled out of her. "Why are you hiding up here?" He didn't look up from sharpening his knife. "Not hiding," he said. "Living. You vanish every day. You barely speak. You act like a man with no name." His jaw clenched. "Some things ain't yours to know." "I saw your journal," she said quietly. The knife and sharpening stone went still. "You had no right," he said, his voice turning dangerous. "And you had no right to let me wonder whether the man who saved me is also the man who might kill me." He stood slowly, turning to face her. His pale eyes were blazing. "If I wanted you dead, Clara, you'd have died in the snow." "Then what are you?" she whispered. "Who are those men in your journal?" "My past," he said, "and none of it concerns you." He tried to walk away, but she stepped between him and the door. "You do not know what I've lost," he snapped. "You come from a soft life with a home and a husband." "My husband was shot in our doorway," she fired back. "I buried him with my own hands. Don't tell me what I know." Her voice cracked. "Whatever you're running from, it cannot be worse than what I've already lived." His anger drained in an instant, leaving something raw and wounded behind. He looked away, swallowing hard. "Yes," he said quietly, "it can." They didn't speak again for hours. But the air between them had changed, softer, sadder, honest. Then one night, the storm brought wolves close enough to howl against the cabin walls. The sound pierced the darkness, low and hungry. Clara's heart pounded. Her palate felt a mile away from safety. She rose, trembling, and crossed the room. Without a word, she slipped into his bedroll beside him. Eli went rigid. He didn't move, didn't speak. She breathed in the scent of pine and smoke clinging to him, the heat rolling off his body stronger than any fire. He didn't push her away. Another howl ripped through the night. Clara pressed close, her voice breaking. "Don't stop. I need this." For a long moment he stayed frozen. Then, slowly, carefully, he lowered his arm around her. His touch was hesitant, unsure, but his warmth closed around her like a shield. She felt his breath against her hair. Outside, the wolves cried. Inside the cabin, for the first time in months, Clara felt safe. Morning came quietly, a pale gray light sliding across the cabin floor. Clara woke alone, the bedroll still warm beside her. Eli was already outside, the steady rhythm of his axe echoing against the snowy pines. Nothing was said about the night before. The world between them had changed, but neither dared speak it aloud. Spring crept into the mountains in small, tender ways. Snow melted from the roof. The creek began to sing again. Clara gathered wild onions while Eli repaired broken tools. Their days settled into a quiet, shared rhythm. They cooked together, worked together, existed together in a gentle stillness that felt almost like healing. But peace never lasts long in the West. One clear morning, a trapper wandered into their clearing. Jebediah, old, wiry, tobacco-stained. He accepted their coffee and traded weather stories, but his eyes lingered too long on Eli's face. Then recognition flickered. "I know you," he rasped. "You're Black Carver. There's a $500 bounty on you from Kansas to Colorado." Clara froze. Eli didn't. He stepped forward, voice low and deadly calm. "You didn't see me. You saw an empty cabin. If you say otherwise, I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." Fear drained the color from the trapper's face. He fled without looking back. Clara felt the world tilt. The list of names in his journal, the way he disappeared for hours, the scars, the silence, the loneliness. She knew the truth now. Eli wasn't just hiding from his past. He was buried by it. That evening, she found him sitting alone by the fire, staring at the flames, as if searching for something inside them. "Tell me," she whispered. "Tell me everything." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he exhaled slowly, like releasing a weight he'd carried for years. "I once rode with men who thought a gun solved everything. I was fast. Too fast. People feared me. They called me Black Carver long before I earned it." He paused. "There was a shootout. A little girl died. She was holding a corn-husk doll. My brother fired the shot, but he had a wife, a baby coming. So I took the blame. I disappeared so he could live." Clara's throat tightened. The burden he carried was heavier than any snowstorm. Before she could speak, he said quietly, "There is no redemption for a man like me." "Yes," she whispered fiercely. "There is. You saved me. You saved my life. That matters." He shook his head. "If I leave this mountain, trouble will follow. Trouble always follows me." But trouble had already